Welcome to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast, bringing you the latest updates from the world of sports, gambling, and pop culture. Because you can't have a show without hot takes or a Tiger King meme these days. Know what I'm saying? Now, with over 200 episodes and ready to get after it again, here's your host, Dwayne Callender.
Hello, everyone. Excited to kind of do this quick draft primer because I really want to hit some of the key talking points to kind of get across as a whole that I've seen in drafts leading up to the NFL kickoff Thursday, but I really wanted to kind of touch upon some of the big issues that I've seen in drafts in past years. We'll continue to see in drafts because it's already started to promulgate throughout, what's been going on. But, in terms of the aspect that you're going to see in drafts is, people get caught up with, I got to have the number one pick. If I don't have the number one pick, I can't get there in other draft spots. That's just not true. What it comes down to is having the balance in your roster and setting up the game plan in advance. When people talk about a zero running back strategy, you're not doing that if you're top three pick more often than not, unless it's a PPR league with heavily weighted bonuses on the receiving side. You're probably taking a running back up top because you've got McCaffrey, Saquon, and Zeke at the top three right there. And even some folks throwing in Dalvin Cook. But you have to have the game plan in place as to how you're going to execute on your draft. So that's where the focus needs to be on. Not necessarily the draft position, but what are you going to do with the draft pick that you have? So one of the takeaways that I always leave with people is, what draft prep did you do beforehand? And what are some of the common things you can avoid getting caught up in? Because one of the most common things is, I'll see folks just looking at it saying, well, I'm just going to take the best quarterback that I saw last year with one of my top two picks. And again, year over year doesn't necessarily translate as well for quarterbacks. And again, quarterbacks are, a spot where, there's not as much separation from the top compared to the other position. So, the top of running back for the top three versus everyone else has a much greater variance than what you would get at QB. Even with as great a season as Lamar Jackson had, you had a number of folks that didn't pan out. Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, for various reasons, did not pan out as well when you took them that high compared to draft picks much later in the draft that played a factor in how the season standings ended up. McCaffrey was not the consensus running back 1, 2, or 3. I had him a little bit further down. I had him behind Zeke, and McCaffrey put up the numbers to justify the overall running back 1. The folks who took Saquon consensus number 1 got burned with Saquon's injury, but no one knew the Giants' offense was going to be as putrid as it was. So again, as I kind of talk about this, you just kind of bear in mind having the value throughout your draft. So when you're starting to look at various lists and planning out your draft, you have to be thinking about what are my next 3 picks subsequent to the pick I'm making. Which positions am I going after? The rationale would be balancing out your skill set position, so going running back heavy or wide receiver heavy if you're going a zero running back strategy, and then filling out a QB and tight end on the back end, because you've got plenty of value in those positions later on in drafts that people aren't considering sexy picks. So you got a Mike Gesicki, the tight end for the Miami Dolphins. You got an Hayden Hurst, who's now the tight end for the Falcons that they traded for. You got Austin Hooper, now with the Cleveland Browns. You have tight ends later in the draft. And then on the QB side, you got Big Ben still coming back off of injury. You got Phillip Rivers playing behind the best, one of, if not the best offensive line in football with the Indianapolis Colts. So you have to start thinking about where you're going to get a better separation, and it's in those skill position players from rounds 3 through 8. Realistically, you should be getting tons of value with those picks. Again, I'm not necessarily going to begrudge anyone that takes Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. Also, a couple of things that I want to make sure you guys, first and foremost, pay attention to. Your league format, you got to know how many teams are in each league. It makes a difference in terms of your roster depth. Is it standard league? Is it half point per reception? Is it full point reception? All these factors play a role in the process of how you're going to build out your strategy. Then number of teams and the number of playoff spots. If you only have 4 playoff spots in your league, guess what? Try to reach for boom or bust players. Not as high a priority as it should be, because at that point, if you only got 4 playoff spots, you need consistent floor values most of the weeks, because at that point, the season's about the grind of getting quality wins on the board and not having those drop-offs. And because if you got, if you're susceptible to bye weeks or anything of that nature, having boom or bust players, not exactly a great recipe of advancing into the playoffs, because again, you need a more consistent floor more often than not. So just things to kind of bear in mind as you're going through the process. If you see that your player gets sniped in your draft, don't reach for your next pick, because guess what? You may be overreaching and cripple your fantasy team because you overreached because you couldn't think of an alternative player. You have to have the alternates in advance. When I'm talking about planning out 3 picks in advance, it's who the players that you really want to have are, and then having 2 substitute players in mind. And yes, I know that's work for individuals to kind of think that far ahead, and you just want to enjoy your fantasy drafts. But guess what? Some of the opponents in your league are already doing this. So you gotta be on your toes when it comes to these matters, because otherwise you're going to end up getting left behind, and no one wants to get smoked in their fantasy league. Guaranteed, that's just not something any of us want to happen. So with that being said, I wish you all luck. I'll do some more content heading into post draft and how to kind of manage out your rosters depending on what you like, what you didn't like. I'm not going to do so much of the pick forecasting this year, because with the current COVID environment, it's really hard to justify any projections this year, because we really don't know how this season's going to play out. This is more about trying to see if you can have a good time and rolling with the punches here, because there's a lot going on, and anyone who says they know exactly how a league's going to pan out this year is full of it. But it is what it is. We can only do what we think makes the most sense in terms of our rankings. I'll have the rankings posted as well, just so you can take a look at that for download purposes. But that's all for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all other major outlets.